shootings at airports, burning buses and roadblocks across the country, gunfights in a holiday metropolis. All of these are the consequences of a military operation in Mexico, during which El Mencho, one of the world's most wanted drug traffickers, was killed yesterday. Since then, Mexico has been sinking into violence because El Mencho's cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, has responded with sheer terrorism. As the violence continues to spread, fears of U.S. intervention are growing. We want to talk about that, as well as about what happened here in this video.
Holy cow, now save the most at Holy with my code.
In a military operation, Mexican forces tried to capture nemesis Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, who is also known as El Mencho. The operation took place after intelligence support from the U.S., but there was no direct involvement of U.S. forces. By monitoring a lover of his who was brought to him, and that, in turn, enabled the Mexican authorities to seal off the area and attempt to arrest him. When he realized that the Mexican government troops were there to capture him, he left behind some of his sicarios, who engaged in gunfights with the government troops, while he himself fled into an adjacent forest area. And these are supposed to be the recordings of Mexican government troops who are marching up to the adjacent forest area or entering it. During the attempted arrest, he was then killed, or rather, during the subsequent gunfight following the arrest attempt, 4 of his bodyguards were killed. 3 other people were wounded, including El Mencho, and during the raid, heavy weapons were also seized, including armored vehicles and anti-tank weapons. El Mencho was seriously injured as a result and died on the way to the hospital, where he was being flown. He was the leader of the CJNG, that is, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel in Mexico. This is one of the 2 largest and most powerful cartels. It is often described as even more powerful than the rival Sinaloa cartel, and it has been weakened since the arrest of El Chapo. A bounty of $15 million was placed on El Mencho himself, which shows the importance from the perspective of the U.S. government. As a result, the cartel responded with sheer terror, both to take revenge and probably also to restrict the government. These are 18 states that in this case are already shown on maps where the clashes and events have occurred. According to the latest reports, there are now 250 attacks in 20 states, so the whole thing has spread even further. The United States has urged its citizens not to go out on the streets. That means this shelter-in-place order, that people should stay where they are and not travel around anymore. There are numerous U.S. tourists who were there and have said that they are now practically hiding in their hotel, since, for example, they can't even go to the airport. Dozens of airlines have also stopped flights to Puerto Vallarta Airport, where there have been reports of shootings, and there are videos of tourists, of airline passengers, who are in a panic at the airport. Schools in many provinces in Mexico have also been closed to keep the streets as empty as possible, and to make sure that as few people as possible get caught in the crossfire. Nevertheless, more and more reports are coming in. More and more roadblocks have been reported. We have here footage from Puerto Vallarta where the arrest took place. There we can see fires all over the city, and you can repeatedly see how vehicles were stopped and then set on fire. That means anyone traveling around now also risks being pulled out of their vehicle and having the vehicle set on fire. And even the slightest resistance could, of course, lead to the person being killed. There were massive clashes, including against government forces. Some real ambushes were set up, and we actually have footage of such an ambush here on video. This is a member of the cartel who is shooting at National Guardsmen here, standing next to a vehicle. And that firefight there was particularly impressive because it was captured from several perspectives, since we have several video recordings of it. Here, we have a surveillance camera that also shows it, and we can see that. Everything you see here, these little clouds of dust, are bullet impacts, which show how the firefight is being conducted here. These were National Guardsmen who were on the move there, and we can fast forward in the video, and we see impacts. And then there are also ramming attacks by a cartel vehicle, which rams one of the government troops' pickups twice here. We have a second attack here, which happens right here at this point. There were at least some injuries. I haven't seen any reports of deaths, but it seems at least likely. And here we even have a third recording of this. Here you can already see the deployment of government troops. This is in the immediate vicinity of the incident. Here we can see them driving to the right, probably to cordon off the area. On the right side of the image, we already had numerous uniformed personnel. And here we have more police and National Guardsmen. And the ambulance, I think the footage is probably from an ambulance, pulls up here. And here we can see, that's the vehicle that was rammed twice. All of those are impacts on the vehicle itself. And look at the windshield of this vehicle. Here and there, you can clearly see the extent of the violence in this case. According to Le Monde, dozens and dozens of Mexican government officers were killed. Le Monde reports at least 25. In addition, there are likely several dozen sicarios killed. So in total, dozens of deaths, probably over 50 deaths at this point. The whole situation is also being exploited by the cartel itself, which is basically using new means to increase the terror. A whole series of fake news images were published, which the local government points out here were AI-generated images being spread. That's exactly what I saw a lot of yesterday, supposedly showing a burning plane at the airport. Of course, this is also meant to maximize the impact, because in the past, there have been governments in Mexico that have held back in fighting the cartels, basically giving them free rein, whether it's making money or arming themselves. And the reason the government held back was the violence that arose in fighting the cartels. So the government decided, we'd rather let criminals act than have deaths occur. And that has to be understood in this context, that the cartel wants to tell the government in this way. This is the consequence if you mess with us. And while it fuels the drug war in Mexico, it's of course the case that not only warlike violence, but also the arrest of cartel bosses with subsequent conflicts can have consequences far beyond immediate security. For example, here on the Mexican tourism industry, which will certainly not benefit from the events of the past 24 hours. And this is where today's sponsor comes in, who can help you respond directly to this. Today, I actually brought a little goodie for you. You already know my new partner, the all-in-one investment app from XTB. When you open an account, XTB gives you a free Hugo Boss share. To do this, click on the link in the video description or scan the QR code. Complete the account opening, agree to the terms and conditions in the app, and deposit any amount. You have now secured your share, the perfect start to building your portfolio. Because as you know, with XTB, you can invest up to 100,000 euros per month commission-free in over 9,000 stocks and ETFs. Anyone who invests regularly, for example for retirement, knows how much fees can add up over the years. Here, more capital stays in the market. XTB already supports over 2 million customers with financial matters, and does so with a high level of regulatory security. Especially when it comes to long-term wealth decisions, that's crucial for me. I want to have a strong partner by my side whom I can trust. Finances are a sensitive topic where I don't want to make any compromises. You can find the link to open a free account and get a free Hugo Boss share at XTB in the video description or via the QR code. Start now and let your money work for you. Let's continue talking about the CJNG, about the cartel itself. This is possibly the most powerful cartel not only in Mexico, but in the world. It's also a pioneer of drone attacks in Mexico. In 2020, it carried out a spectacular assassination attempt on the then chief of police of the capital. However, this attempt failed, and the man is now the security minister in the current cabinet, Scheinbaum. In addition, the cartel also shot down a military helicopter in 2015 with a .50 caliber machine gun in which 9 members of the Mexican armed forces were killed in the attack. In addition to drug trafficking, the cartel is also involved in human trafficking, extortion, kidnapping, and fraud, and it engages in illegal resource extraction. In addition to other drugs, fentanyl is primarily smuggled into the United States, which is produced in Mexico in the cartel's own labs using chemicals from China. All of this shows the full extent of the cartel's danger. For Mexico, it is very important for the Sheinbaum government to show the United States that they are taking action against the cartels. And yesterday's operation certainly must have helped with that. And while the United States has classified the cartels as narco-terrorists, which has once again been justified in the last 24 hours, there has been a great fear in recent months that because of this designation, the United States might intervene in Mexico. But even though the situation has escalated at the moment, it still seems unlikely, as long as there isn't any significant spillover of violence across the borders between Mexico and the United States. We have to be clear, Trump currently has more than enough to do because of Iran, so he can't really carry out any intervention in Mexico that goes beyond accompanying Mexican forces. What are the consequences of this? Well, the CJNG cartel has taken a heavy blow. In the past, the decapitation of cartels often led to a kind of civil war within the cartels themselves over succession, and often also to the breakup of the organization. Because if there is a conflict over succession, it naturally gives underbosses the opportunity to become independent, break away with their own people, and start their own cartel, which in turn leads to further violence. At the same time, competitors can take advantage of the power vacuum when the central leadership is weakened or temporarily gone, to seize territory and smuggling routes, and that can also lead to further violence. So the big question will be how quickly and how effectively a new leadership can establish itself. But even if that happens, it will lead to more violence, because the new leadership will consider it necessary to prove its ability to act, whether through high-profile actions like these roadblocks and attacks on the government, or through attacks on other cartels. So, in general, more violence can be expected. That is the unfortunate result here. With the killing of El Mencho, of course, one of the most important drug criminals has been neutralized. However, it is anything but foreseeable that this will lead to an improvement in Mexico or in the USA, as far as smuggling itself is concerned. The killing of a leader may take his charisma and organizational talent out of the game. But that doesn't mean that violence can't massively escalate afterwards. And that is the unfortunate conclusion of yesterday's operation, which was a major police success, if you will, but in the worst case could even make the situation worse. By the way, that's one of the arguments why past Mexican governments mostly left the cartels alone, because they didn't see a direct way out of it. We've just heard that again, stated clearly. Ultimately, the main problem is north of the border, because as long as Americans buy drugs in huge quantities, there will be someone south of the border who wants to smuggle it to them. And as long as the profit is big enough, violence among everyone involved is justified. That's the unfortunate reality. And that's it for this video. If you liked it, if you found it interesting, of course I appreciate a thumbs up. That helps me with the algorithm, and leave a comment if you have something to add. And if you're new here, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell. That's all for now from Torsten Heinrich. Thank you very much for your attention and see you soon. Thanks also to the supporters on Patreon, as well as the members here on YouTube. In particular, I would like to thank Lieutenant Colonels Mahamuri and Thomas Kamp, as well as Lieutenants Vision, Soundlab, Robert Viel, Matt Burke, Möta 1000 Beertainment, Janis Gu, NTX, Sascha Müller, Cunningham, Oistres, Jans vom Eck, Uwe die Fremen, Nickname 2Bip, Carsten Schulz, Gulasch Nascher 4000 and Tequila. 42. Thank you. This wouldn't be possible without them.